Captain Elias Vorn stood at the edge of the landing platform, gazing at the sprawling city beneath the twin suns of Zalaris. His armor, polished and gleaming, reflected the light in dazzling streaks, but today it felt heavier than usual, not because of the weight, but because of the tension that hung in the air. This was no ordinary mission. The humans had been invited, or perhaps summoned, to negotiate a mining treaty, but the aliens of Zalaris were not known for hospitality. Their reputation for pride and suspicion preceded them. Elias knew that whatever happened in the next few days could shape humanity's place in this sector for decades. He adjusted his stance and breathed deeply. The city below was unlike any human settlement he had ever seen. Towers of glass and metal twisted toward the sky, some floating in the air as though defying gravity. The streets were filled with beings of all shapes and sizes, their skin shimmering in colors that humans could only describe as impossible. Many looked at him curiously, their large, multifaceted eyes scanning his armored form. He could sense the unspoken judgment. Humans were known but not well understood. The platform doors hissed open behind him and a figure approached. Thalira, the high emissary of Zalaris, moved with the grace of someone used to command. Her tall frame was draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Her eyes, a deep violet, seemed to pierce into his mind, analyzing every detail. Elias felt a momentary chill. He had faced enemies, predators, and hostile worlds, but there was something about her presence that demanded attention. "Captain Elias Vorn," she said, her voice melodic but firm, carrying an authority that left little room for argument. "Welcome to Zalaris. We have heard much about your kind." He kept his tone polite but steady. He had learned long ago that diplomacy required patience, even when faced with scorn. Thalira's lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes remained calculating. "I am told that humans are bold, perhaps too bold. You believe you can negotiate treaties with experience alone, yet you may not understand our ways. I understand enough to know that every civilization values different things. I am here to find common ground, not to challenge your customs unnecessarily." Zalaris was beautiful, but it was also alien in ways that unsettled him. The air smelled faintly metallic, the light refracted oddly through the atmosphere, and every movement seemed deliberate, as though the city itself had a rhythm and Elias was an intruder in it. They arrived at the council hall, a massive structure that seemed to hum with energy. Delegates from across the sector filled the chamber. Some looked on with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. Elias felt the weight of their eyes as though every gaze tested his worth. He reminded himself to remain calm, to let humanity's reputation speak through him. Thalira gestured to a seat at the center table. "You will sit here, Captain. Let the discussions begin." Every suggestion was met with meticulous scrutiny, as if they were weighing not just the proposal but the human behind it. After the initial presentations, Thalira spoke again, her tone sharp. "Your approach is too direct, Captain Vorn. Diplomacy is subtle. You must understand the unspoken currents that guide our decisions. I understand that humans approach problems differently. We believe that clarity and honesty often produce better results than endless caution. We adapt." Their willingness to defy expectations made some uneasy. After a moment, she returned her attention to him. "You claim to adapt, yet you are unaware of how your presence is perceived. You walk boldly into a world where caution is valued above all. It is not merely a matter of negotiation, it is a matter of survival. Do you truly understand the risks?" "I understand that every mission carries risk, but we are not here to survive alone. We are here to build bridges, to show that humans can contribute to stability and prosperity. Tomorrow, you will participate in trials designed to test your abilities, your intellect, your strategy, and your capacity to adapt. Consider it both a lesson and an evaluation." He could sense that these tests were not merely practical. They were designed to challenge him personally, to expose weaknesses that might undermine humanity's credibility. The council chamber emptied, leaving Elias and Thalira alone for a moment. She regarded him thoughtfully. "You are unlike any human I have met. You walk with confidence, yet there is humility beneath it. Perhaps this is what makes your kind dangerous and remarkable." The first would test negotiation skills under extreme pressure. The second was a survival challenge in Xylaris's harsh terrain, and the third involved a tactical puzzle in zero-gravity chambers. Each test was meant to highlight human flaws, impulsiveness, recklessness, unpredictability. Yet Elias saw an opportunity in every challenge. Humans thrived on unpredictability. Adaptability was in their nature. As he prepared for sleep, Elias reflected on the subtle battle that had already begun. This was not a simple negotiation. This was a test of perception, of judgment, of character. Thalira had scorned him, perhaps out of pride or habit, but he understood the deeper lesson. Respect had to be earned, not demanded. Humans had survived for millennia precisely because they did not rely on fear or intimidation alone. They relied on intelligence, courage, and the ability to act when others hesitated. The next morning, the sun rose over Xylaris, casting long shadows across the city. Elias stood on the balcony of his quarters, watching as delegates and citizens moved below. He felt a calm determination settle over him. The trials would be difficult, designed to humiliate, yet he would face them as humans always had, with courage, ingenuity, and unflinching resolve. When Thalira arrived to escort him to the first trial, Elias was ready. He did not raise his guard, though his armor remained pristine. Instead, he carried something more powerful than weapons: clarity of purpose. The walk through the city was quiet, save for the whispers of those observing. Some stared with curiosity, others with doubt. Elias met their gaze evenly. Humans were entering a world where they were underestimated, and he would show that underestimation was their greatest advantage. As the gates of the trial chambers opened, Elias felt the eyes of Xylaris upon him. He did not flinch. He did not hesitate. He stepped forward, knowing that every decision, every reaction would matter. The first challenge was about to begin, and with it, the beginning of a story that would test not just his skill, but the very essence of what it meant to be human in a universe that doubted them. He looked at Thalira, standing poised and confident. Her scorn had been clear, her judgment sharp. Yet Elias knew that respect, once earned, would be far more powerful than any weapon. He drew a deep breath and entered the chamber. The trials had begun, and with them, humanity's unpredictable brilliance would soon shine. The first trial took place in a chamber that stretched higher than any human building Elias had ever seen. The walls were smooth, metallic, and seemed to absorb sound, making every footstep echo unnaturally. The floor shimmered with patterns of light that shifted with movement, and the air carried a faint hum, like the pulse of the city itself. Elias knew this was no ordinary test. Every detail was meant to unnerve and intimidate. Thalira stood at the entrance, her gaze sharp. "This trial will test your understanding of negotiation under pressure. You will face multiple factions with conflicting interests. Your goal is to find an agreement that satisfies all parties. Fail, and it will reflect poorly on humanity." Understood. The task was simple in description but fiendishly complex in execution. Reach a solution acceptable to all, while navigating conflicting demands and subtle traps meant to expose mistakes. The first faction spoke immediately. They demanded exclusive access to a valuable mineral that humans needed for their own technology. The second faction wanted to monopolize trade routes, which would limit the humans' freedom. The third had strict moral rules, refusing to compromise even a little. Elias listened carefully, noting the patterns in their arguments, their priorities, and their hidden pressures. Most humans would have tried to push through, offering concessions in a straightforward way. Elias, however, relied on observation, patience, and an understanding of the psychology of negotiation. He knew that aliens of Zalaris were proud and cautious, and they respected clever solutions more than bribes or threats. When the first faction insisted on dominance over the mineral, Elias asked simple questions, clarifying their real needs rather than the positions they were presenting. Slowly, he uncovered that their true concern was security. They feared others would exploit the mineral and undermine their influence. The solution, Elias proposed, was a shared oversight council, with each faction having representation. Security would be ensured, but no single faction would dominate. The room buzzed with murmurs. Some of the aliens were visibly skeptical, expecting him to fail or compromise too much. But Elias remained calm, explaining each suggestion clearly, using logic and fairness rather than force. The second faction, fixated on trade routes, initially refused to budge. Their arguments were technical and rigid, full of economic formulas and logistical constraints. Elias listened, nodding thoughtfully. Then he proposed an exchange system. Humans would offer temporary route access in rotation, ensuring that no faction gained permanent advantage, while increasing overall efficiency and profits. The aliens were surprised. No one had suggested compromise that preserved autonomy for all parties. Finally, the faction with strict moral codes spoke. They insisted that any agreement must adhere to principles that would prevent exploitation or unfairness. Humans, they implied, were too self-serving to be trusted. Elias paused, considering their stance. He acknowledged their concerns openly, demonstrating empathy without weakness. Then he proposed oversight mechanisms that included moral evaluations, transparency audits, and a council of diverse species to enforce the rules. The room fell silent. For a moment, it seemed impossible that everyone could agree. Yet Elias' approach, blending logic, observation, and understanding of alien psychology, created a solution that satisfied all factions. Slowly they nodded, murmuring approval. Thalira watched closely, her expression unreadable. "You have succeeded," she said finally, her voice steady. "But do not imagine that one victory earns trust. Your species is unpredictable and your methods are unconventional. That is both your strength and your weakness." "We adapt." Elias was transported to a rugged landscape outside the city, where jagged rocks jutted from the ground. Rivers of molten metal flowed dangerously close, and the wind carried a sharp, metallic tang that burned the lungs. He was expected to retrieve specific artifacts from the terrain while navigating hazards that were meant to test both endurance and intelligence. The alien instructors watched silently from above, observing every movement, every choice. Other competitors from various species struggled, some faltering quickly, their strategies failing under pressure. Elias, however, approached the terrain methodically. He did not rush, nor did he rely solely on human strength. He observed patterns in the molten streams, calculated timing to cross narrow rock bridges, and used natural formations as cover when traversing exposed areas. Several times, he faced situations that could have ended disastrously. A narrow rock ledge above a molten river threatened to collapse, and a sudden heat wave made the air almost impossible to breathe. Yet Elias adapted, moving carefully but confidently, using intelligence and awareness rather than brute force. When other species faltered, they often cried out, panicking or hesitating. Elias maintained focus, steady breathing, and calm reasoning. By the time he reached the final artifact, the alien observers were clearly impressed. He had completed the trial efficiently, avoiding injury and demonstrating clever problem-solving. Thalira approached him as he stepped back onto solid ground, her robes slightly swaying in the hot wind. "You have done well," she said. "Many would have failed, yet your methods are unorthodox. You rely too much on intuition and improvisation." Intuition and improvisation are tools. They are not weaknesses if used wisely. Participants had to secure objectives while navigating three-dimensional space, all under strict time constraints. Most competitors were overwhelmed by the environment. Movement was disorienting, and the AI opponents adapted quickly to predictable strategies. Elias, however, approached the challenge as he had the others: observe, calculate, and anticipate. He allowed himself to float freely, understanding how momentum worked in zero gravity, and used it to maneuver efficiently. He predicted the AI's patterns, setting traps that led them into advantageous positions for him, and avoided unnecessary confrontations. Time and again, he solved complex puzzles, captured objectives, and completed tasks faster than any competitor. The chamber itself seemed to bend to his understanding, a combination of human intellect and adaptability triumphing over rigid rules. By the end of the day, Elias had not only completed all 3 trials but had done so with a style that no alien had expected. His methods were unconventional, relying on reasoning, observation, and a willingness to take calculated risks. Where others saw chaos, he found opportunity. Where others panicked, he remained calm. As he exited the zero-gravity chamber, sweat beading on his forehead and hair dampened from exertion, he faced Thalira. She stood silently, watching him, her eyes unreadable. For the first time, he sensed a flicker of something else behind her gaze, respect though unspoken. "You have exceeded expectations," she said finally. "I admit, humans possess a capacity for adaptability that surpasses what we anticipated. Your species' reputation for recklessness is not without merit, but there is intelligence and skill behind it that demands acknowledgement. Perhaps because our ways are different. You have proven capability, but character will be tested further." Their unpredictability was not weakness, it was strength. As the trials concluded, Elias reflected on what had transpired. Each challenge had been designed to provoke failure, to expose human flaws. Yet each time he had found solutions through patience, observation, and adaptability. Where others saw obstacles, he saw puzzles. Where others hesitated, he acted decisively. The scorn that had been directed at him initially had begun to shift, though subtly. Thalira's final words echoed in his mind. Character would be tested further. Elias understood that the greatest challenges were not always physical or tactical. They were often social, psychological, and political. Humans had survived for millennia because they faced not only the physical dangers of the world, but also the judgments, assumptions, and biases of others. As he returned to his quarters that evening, Elias considered the path ahead. Tomorrow would bring new trials and perhaps more public scrutiny. But he felt confident, not in arrogance, but in the knowledge that humanity's strength lay in its intelligence, adaptability, and courage. He gazed out at the glowing city of Zalaris, twin suns casting long shadows, and allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The aliens had scorned humans initially, but every step he took, every decision he made, was slowly reshaping their perception. He would not fight for respect through force alone. He would earn it through competence, resilience, and the undeniable brilliance of his species. The next day promised more challenges, but Elias was ready. He had faced the first wave, and in doing so, had begun to show Zalaris that humanity was far more than they expected. Scorn could be turned into respect if one acted with intelligence, courage, and an unwavering sense of purpose. And Elias Vorn intended to do exactly that. The sun rose slowly over Zalaris, casting golden light across the sprawling city and glimmering towers. Captain Elias Vorn awoke with a sense of quiet determination. Yesterday's trials had tested his intellect, strategy, and adaptability, and he had succeeded in ways that had even impressed Thalira, though she had not admitted it openly. Today, however, promised a new kind of challenge, a trial designed not to test skill, but to probe character, resilience, and the limits of human patience. Elias knew that this would be the true measure of whether humans could earn the respect of Zalaris. He prepared for the day with careful thought, reviewing every observation from the previous trials. Each faction had been meticulously studied, each reaction recorded in his mind. Elias understood that this next challenge would likely push him into situations meant to provoke anger, fear, or rash action. Yet he also knew that human strength often revealed itself most when others tried to manipulate them emotionally or socially. Thalira arrived at his quarters precisely at the appointed time, as if measuring his punctuality as much as his readiness. She was dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered in the morning light, a constant reminder of her authority and the hierarchy of Zalaris society. Her violet eyes, deep and intense, seemed to examine not just him but every detail of his being. "Captain Elias Vorn," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "today's trial will take place in the Forum of Challenges. It is public and observed by delegates from across the sector. Your objective is not only to achieve your goals but to do so under scrutiny. Many will attempt to provoke you, to see if human pride leads to rash decisions. Fail, and humanity's reputation suffers. We are accustomed to scrutiny." Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright disdain. Some whispered in low tones, likely betting on human failure. Elias could feel their judgment, but he also felt something else: opportunity. Humans had survived by turning underestimation into advantage. In the center of the forum, several platforms floated above the floor, each containing objectives that required negotiation, tactical thinking, and diplomacy. The platforms moved unpredictably, requiring participants to adapt in real time. The crowd murmured as Elias stepped onto his assigned platform, his armor polished and shining under the artificial sunlight of the chamber. The first part of the trial began immediately. A series of alien representatives approached him, each attempting to corner him into concessions or mistakes. One faction demanded exclusive access to critical resources, using intimidation and threats. Another insisted on rules that would restrict human freedom. A third tried to appeal to morality, implying that humans were selfish and untrustworthy. Most species would have reacted with fear or anger. Elias, however, remained calm. He listened carefully, asking simple but precise questions to uncover the true concerns behind each faction's demands. Where others saw obstacles, he saw patterns. He recognized that the first faction's threats were a bluff. They feared losing control more than they desired resources. He proposed a compromise that secured their interests while allowing humans fair access. The second faction, the most rigid in their rules, attempted to bait him into rash decisions. They presented extreme scenarios, hoping he would respond impulsively. Elias paused, considering each option carefully. Then, using logic and fairness, he devised a solution that satisfied their technical requirements without sacrificing human principles. The murmurs of the audience shifted subtly from doubt to surprise. The moral faction presented the greatest challenge. They attempted to shame him, implying that humans could not be trusted to act ethically under pressure. Elias responded not with anger but with quiet confidence. He outlined a system that included transparency, oversight, and ethical safeguards, demonstrating that humans were capable of moral responsibility as well as adaptability. The crowd fell silent. For the first time, the forum seemed genuinely impressed. Delegates exchanged glances, whispering about the ingenuity of the human approach. Even Thalira, standing apart from the spectators, watched with an expression that was impossible to read. She had scorned humans initially, but Elia's calm intelligence was beginning to pierce through her doubts. The second stage of the trial required physical and tactical skill. Elias was transported to a shifting landscape, where floating platforms moved above molten rivers, jagged rocks, and sudden drops. The environment was designed to test balance, spatial awareness, and quick thinking under pressure. Many competitors faltered immediately, panicking or hesitating in the face of danger. Elias, however, approached the terrain methodically. He calculated trajectories, used the momentum of floating platforms, and relied on both intuition and observation. Several near-fatal moments tested his composure. A platform tilted sharply beneath him, sending him skimming dangerously close to a molten river. He adjusted his balance and leapt to a stable surface with seconds to spare. Another platform began to collapse under weight, threatening to tip him into a hazard below. Elias quickly assessed the situation and redirected his path, using the environment to his advantage rather than viewing it solely as a threat. Through careful planning, adaptability, and focus, Elias completed the physical challenge without injury, setting a pace that no other competitor could match. The alien observers were visibly impressed, whispering among themselves about the human's resilience and ingenuity. Thalira approached him once more, her eyes narrowed but her voice calm. "You are impressive, Captain Vorn. Few have completed this stage without error, yet you rely on instinct and improvisation too heavily. What if the next challenge removes those options? Today, your character will face its ultimate test." The chamber simulated real diplomatic scenarios with high stakes. Missteps could result in conflict, loss of reputation, or humiliation before the entire sector. The chamber attempted to provoke him. Simulated factions insulted him, doubted his competence, and tried to bait him into arrogance or frustration. Every detail was designed to test whether human pride would become a weakness. Elias, however, responded with calm reasoning. He treated each provocation as data, analyzing intent, motivation, and expected outcomes. He negotiated with patience, demonstrated fairness, and avoided the traps set to provoke him emotionally. By the time the simulation concluded, it was clear that Elias had not only succeeded but excelled. He had maintained composure under pressure, outmaneuvered complex challenges, and demonstrated both intelligence and resilience. The audience, alien and human alike, erupted into murmurs of approval. Thalira stepped forward, her expression measured but showing a flicker of recognition. "Captain Vorn, you have surpassed the expectations of these trials. You have demonstrated intelligence, adaptability, and the capacity to maintain composure under provocation. Humans may indeed possess qualities we have underestimated." The whispers of the observers filled the silence, a mixture of surprise, admiration, and reconsideration. Humans, once seen as reckless or limited in capability, were now viewed with cautious respect. Elias' calm confidence and skill had begun to shift perceptions in ways that no words alone could achieve. As the trial concluded, Thalira approached him privately. Her eyes, still sharp, now held a hint of contemplation rather than scorn. "You have proven that humans are more than we believed. Yet one trial does not guarantee trust. Future challenges will test diplomacy, morality, and endurance in ways you cannot predict. Underestimation is often our advantage." The trials had been designed to provoke failure, to expose weakness, and to challenge the assumptions of his species. Yet he had succeeded not through force alone, but through intelligence, adaptability, and a steady hand under pressure. The whispers of the delegates echoed in his mind. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but unpredictability was not weakness, it was strength. By remaining calm, observing carefully, and acting decisively, Elias had turned scorn into cautious respect, doubt into admiration. As the twin suns set over Zelaris, casting long shadows across the city, Elias understood that the true challenge was only beginning. The scorn of Thalira and the skepticism of the council had not been erased. But he had taken the first step in showing that humanity could thrive even under scrutiny, that they could turn doubt into opportunity, and that respect could be earned through action rather than words alone. Elias sat by the window of his quarters, gazing out at the glowing city. He thought of the trials, the whispers, and the eyes that had watched him so closely. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was one he was ready to walk. Humans had survived and thrived not because they were the strongest in every fight, but because they were clever, resilient, and capable of seeing solutions where others saw only obstacles. Tomorrow promised new trials, new challenges, and new opportunities to demonstrate what humanity could achieve. And Elias Vorn, armored, unflinching, and resolute, was ready to show that the scorn of today could become the respect of tomorrow. The next morning, the city of Zalaris was bathed in a soft, silver light from its twin suns. Captain Elias Vorn awoke with a sense of quiet determination. The trials of the previous days had tested his mind, his body, and his ability to endure under scrutiny. He had succeeded, yet he knew the true challenge awaited him. This trial was different. It was not about puzzles, negotiation, or survival alone. It was personal. Thalira's scorn, carefully concealed behind protocol and authority, was about to be confronted directly. Elias could feel the weight of it already. When Thalira arrived at his quarters, her violet eyes were sharper than ever. "Captain Vorn," she said, her voice even and measured, "today's trial will test your integrity, your composure, and your willingness to confront the judgment of others. You will face scenarios designed to provoke emotional response, to tempt rashness. How you respond will determine whether humans are truly worthy of trust. We are prepared for the challenge." The audience was larger than ever, a mixture of delegates, advisors, and curious citizens. Many whispered about the human captain, some in doubt, some in intrigue, others in fascination. Elias felt their scrutiny, but he welcomed it. Humans thrived when underestimated, and he intended to turn this moment into a statement of principle. The trial began with a series of debates. Elias was confronted by a coalition of alien representatives, each attempting to undermine him with logic, rhetoric, or subtle insult. They questioned the reliability of humans, suggested that humans were too proud, reckless, or self-centered to be trusted in matters of diplomacy and trade. Some attempted personal attacks, hinting at weaknesses in his character. Elias responded with calm precision. He did not rise to the bait, nor did he allow anger to dictate his words. Instead, he answered each argument with clarity, addressing the concerns while demonstrating human intelligence, fairness, and ethical reasoning. Where the aliens expected brash responses, they found patience and insight. Where they expected aggression, they found strategic calm. Thalira observed him from the center of the hall, her eyes fixed and unblinking. She had scorned humans from the beginning, but now, with every measured response, she realized that Elias was not only capable but remarkable. He was taking what was meant to humiliate him and turning it into proof of human resilience and capability. The next phase of the trial tested tactical thinking under extreme pressure. Elias was placed in a simulated crisis, a massive trade dispute that threatened to erupt into conflict between multiple factions. The environment was immersive, with holographic projections of alien leaders, resource nodes, and simulated threats. Every decision had immediate consequences, and failure could be disastrous. Many competitors faltered quickly, reacting with panic, defensiveness, or rigid adherence to protocol. Elias, however, relied on observation and reasoning. He quickly assessed the positions and motivations of each faction, predicted their reactions, and devised solutions that balanced fairness, efficiency, and diplomacy. His plan allowed all parties to retain dignity while achieving the objectives. The simulation recognized his success instantly, marking him as the first to complete the scenario flawlessly. Thalira approached him after the simulation, her expression unreadable. "You are remarkable, Captain Vorn. Yet there is one final aspect of this trial, one that cannot be simulated or tested in practice scenarios. It is the true measure of character, courage to act when honor and principle demand it, even when it defies expectation." It had been polished and transported from his quarters for this moment. The audience watched in silence. Thalira spoke, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Captain Vorn, you have proven intelligence, adaptability, and strategic skill. Yet humans are often judged by symbols as well as deeds. Will you continue to rely on your armor, a representation of power and protection, or will you demonstrate that true strength lies within, independent of tools or symbols?" Elias regarded the armor calmly. It was strong, reliable, and familiar. Yet he understood the deeper significance of this moment. To earn respect, he needed to demonstrate courage, confidence, and trust in his own abilities rather than the protection of his suit. Without hesitation, Elias removed the helmet first, placing it carefully on the pedestal. Then he unbuckled the chest plate, arm guards, and leg protection, laying each piece down with deliberate care. Finally, he stepped back, standing unarmored, exposed in front of the entire forum. A hush fell over the chamber. Many delegates gasped, unable to comprehend the audacity of a human walking away from his armor, a symbol of strength and invulnerability. Thalira's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her carefully composed face. Elias did not speak, nor did he flinch. He simply stood with calm dignity, embodying confidence and self-assuredness. Thalira finally spoke, her voice measured but carrying weight. Captain Vorn, humans are unpredictable indeed. Most would see this as recklessness, yet you demonstrate courage, control, and trust in your own capacity. Perhaps this is what makes your species remarkable. Humans have survived and thrived because we rely on these qualities, not the trappings of protection alone. Thalira watched carefully, her initial scorn tempered by recognition. The final phase of the trial required negotiation with real-world consequences. Elias, unarmored, faced multiple alien factions whose interests conflicted sharply. Some attempted to intimidate him, suggesting that a human without protection was vulnerable and inexperienced. Others tried to sway him with flattery or deception. Elias relied on what he had demonstrated in previous trials: observation, reasoning, and empathy. He listened carefully, discerned the true motivations behind each faction's demands, and proposed solutions that were fair, balanced, and innovative. His calm demeanor and logical explanations carried weight precisely because he had demonstrated fearlessness in the forum. His lack of armor did not weaken him, it amplified the credibility of his arguments. Thalira approached him once more after the negotiations concluded. She spoke quietly, though her words carried authority. Captain Vorn, today you have demonstrated qualities that few humans or any species possess: courage, intelligence, integrity, and adaptability. You have earned respect not through force or intimidation, but through skill, judgment, and principle. Humans had often been underestimated in the sector, their unpredictability seen as a liability. Today, however, they had witnessed a demonstration of human brilliance in its purest form: courage, intellect, and the ability to inspire respect through action rather than power. Thalira stood silently for a moment, then addressed the audience. Let this be a lesson. Underestimation can blind even the most experienced. Humans are unpredictable, yes, but their unpredictability is matched by intelligence, adaptability, and courage. Captain Vorn has proven this before us all. He had acted not for recognition, but to demonstrate the principle that true strength is internal, not dependent on symbols or equipment. Thalira's scorn had been confronted, and in doing so, a foundation of respect had been established. As he walked out of the forum of judgment, the crowd parted respectfully. Delegates from multiple factions approached him, some offering words of praise, others simple nods of acknowledgement. Elias understood that this moment would be remembered for a long time. Humanity had earned more than success in trials. They had earned a reputation that would precede them in future negotiations across the sector. That evening, Elias reflected on the events. He had faced trials of intellect, strategy, and endurance, but it was the trial of principle, confronting scorn and demonstrating courage without reliance on armor, that had the greatest impact. He understood now more than ever that humans survived and thrived because they could turn underestimation into advantage, skepticism into opportunity, and scorn into respect. Thalira's voice echoed in his memory. Humans are remarkable. For the first time, she had spoken without pretense, without scorn, and without the protective veil of authority. It was acknowledgement, genuine and rare. Elias knew the path ahead would still hold challenges, but he also knew that today had shifted the perception of humanity across Zelaris. The unarmored walk, the calm negotiation under pressure, and the unwavering composure had shown that humans were capable of greatness far beyond what others had assumed. As the twin suns set, Elias gazed over the city from his quarters. He knew that respect had been earned through intelligence, courage, and principle, and that humanity's reputation had grown stronger in the hearts and minds of the observers. The trials had tested more than skill, they had tested character, and humans had triumphed. And Elias Vorn, standing tall and unarmored, understood that the greatest victories often came not from force, but from integrity, courage, and the quiet demonstration of human brilliance. The city of Zelaris was quiet in the early morning, its twin suns casting long shadows over spired towers and glimmering streets. Captain Elias Vorn stood on the balcony of his quarters, watching the soft movement of ships rising and falling from the orbital docks. The trials were over, yet the impact of what had transpired echoed in the council halls and across the city. For days, humans had been underestimated, their unpredictability seen as weakness. Now their reputation had shifted, and the weight of that change was just beginning to settle. Elias reflected on the journey. The challenges had tested every aspect of human capability: intelligence, adaptability, diplomacy, and courage. Yet the most crucial test had been one of principle, the moment when he had laid aside his armor and stood unshielded before the council. It was a simple act, but it carried meaning beyond words. It demonstrated that human strength was not dependent on tools, symbols, or intimidation. It was rooted in character, resilience, and the ability to act with wisdom under pressure. A soft chime echoed in his quarters, signaling a visitor. Thalira appeared, her presence commanding as always. She had changed subtly over the past days. Her scorn had been replaced with measured respect, and her expressions, though still regal, now hinted at genuine acknowledgement. "Captain Vorn," she said, her voice calm, "you have done more than succeed in trials. You have shown the council, the delegates, and me that humans are capable of far more than we believed. Your actions have shifted perceptions, not through force, but through intelligence and courage. The council will now reconsider the treaties, agreements, and alliances involving humanity. You have created a foundation that will influence relations for decades. We adapt, we persevere, and we demonstrate our value." Others spoke of the potential for cooperation, seeing in humans not recklessness but opportunity for collaboration. Thalira presided over the council, her voice steady and authoritative. "The trials have shown that humans are more capable and adaptable than previously assumed. Captain Vorn's actions have demonstrated intelligence, integrity, and courage. Let this serve as a precedent for future interactions and treaties involving humanity." Humanity's reputation, once fragile and doubted, had been transformed in a single week through determination, intelligence, and courage. Later, Elias was invited to address the assembly personally. Standing unarmored before the gathered delegates, he spoke with clarity and quiet authority. "Humans have long been underestimated across the stars. We are not perfect, nor are we infallible. But we are adaptable, resilient, and capable of learning from every challenge. We seek collaboration, understanding, and mutual respect. Today, we have demonstrated that we act with principle, not merely ambition. That is the human way." Even Thalira's eyes reflected a rare warmth, a recognition that humans were more than allies. They were worthy participants in interstellar society. The day passed with formalities and discussions. Delegates approached Elias, offering alliances, trade opportunities, and proposals for joint exploration. Each conversation reinforced the same lesson: respect was earned through action, and humans had earned it decisively. That evening, Elias returned to the balcony, the city below illuminated by the soft glow of energy lights and distant stars. He removed his armor fully, setting it aside once again. He did not need it to demonstrate strength or authority. The people who mattered now saw what he represented, a symbol of human ingenuity, courage, and principle. Thalira appeared beside him, silent for a moment as she observed the city. "You have changed more than perceptions, Captain Vorn," she said finally. "You have changed the way we think about humans. For the first time, we see your species not as unpredictable or reckless, but as capable, honorable, and essential to interstellar progress." Respect follows naturally from that approach. The journey had been challenging, but every trial had demonstrated the human way: courage under pressure, intelligence in uncertainty, and unwavering principle. It was a way that had earned respect not through weapons or intimidation, but through action and character. In the following days, humanity's presence on Zelaris became stronger. Trade agreements were finalized, joint exploration missions planned, and diplomatic relations solidified. Other species began to view humans not as unpredictable or reckless, but as reliable and adaptable partners. Stories of Elia's unarmored walk, his calm negotiation, and his success under pressure spread across the sector. Humans were no longer underestimated. They were acknowledged as capable and respected participants in interstellar society. Elias continued his work, not seeking recognition, but ensuring that humanity's reputation was maintained through consistent action and demonstration of integrity. Each negotiation, each mission, and each interaction reinforced the lesson that humans thrived not by force alone, but by intelligence, adaptability, and courage. Thalira, once a figure of scorn and pride, had transformed in her understanding of humans. She advocated for collaboration and fair treatment of humanity within the Council, recognizing that their unpredictability was a strength when paired with intelligence and principle. The Council itself began to reevaluate long-held biases, opening doors for more equitable alliances and cooperative ventures. As months passed, humanity's influence on Zelaris grew steadily. Trade routes expanded, technology was shared responsibly, and joint missions explored new sectors. Elia's actions had sparked a movement of understanding and collaboration that extended far beyond the trials themselves. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were partners, respected for their courage, intellect, and ability to rise above scorn and prejudice. One evening, as Elias walked through the quiet streets of Zelaris, he observed the citizens and delegates going about their lives. Many now looked upon humans with curiosity and respect rather than doubt. Children watched him and whispered stories of the human captain who walked unarmored before the council, demonstrating that true strength came from within. He paused on a bridge overlooking the luminous rivers of the city. The weight of armor he once carried seemed distant, almost symbolic of a time when humans were underestimated. Now the armor could be left behind, not as a sign of weakness, but as a demonstration of confidence, courage, and principle. Thalira approached silently. "You have done more than any trial could measure," she said softly. "You have shown that humanity's strength is not in force or dominance, but in the ability to act with integrity, intelligence, and courage. You have inspired a change that will endure. We do not seek accolades, only to prove that capability and principle can coexist. But capable always." In the days that followed, stories of the human captain spread across star systems. Aliens recounted the unarmored walk, the calm diplomacy, and the clever problem-solving that had earned humanity respect. The legend of Elias Vorn became a symbol. Humans were not only survivors, but innovators, thinkers, and courageous beings capable of facing scorn and emerging stronger. Through intelligence, adaptability, and character, humanity had carved a reputation in a galaxy that had doubted them. They had shown that true strength was not in tools or symbols, but in courage, principle, and the quiet confidence to act decisively in the face of judgment. Elias stood one last time on the balcony, watching the city shimmer under the twin moons rising behind the suns. The trials, the scorn, and the judgment had been overcome. Humanity's brilliance had been demonstrated, not in a single act, but through consistency, resilience, and unwavering principle. And in that quiet moment, he knew that the story of humans in the galaxy was only just beginning, a story of courage, intelligence, and the enduring strength of a species unafraid to walk forward unarmored, yet unshakable in spirit.